So today I'm going to be going through some of those basics. If you're coming from a technical AI side, these are some formulas, tools that, in my opinion, should make it quite easy to tell good stories. And that's the great
Albert,
news.
Albert,
Yes.
I'm sorry for interruption, but our guest, if you do have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. I will go through all of them and I will interrupt Albert, as I love to do that, and ask your question. So please be free to ask your questions in the comment section. Thank you. Please continue, Albert.
Thank you very much. Yeah, anytime. I love to monologue. So I'm rarely let loose into the public. So please, you have to stop me if you want me to pause, if you want me to elaborate on anything I say. Please do raise your hand virtually here, or just put it in the chat. I have the chat window open right here, so I'm available for anything. Yes. So basically, my point being today, everything I'm sharing with you is fundamental. It's very important, but I think it's also quite simple if you really make sure you use these tools in every story you're trying to tell. So nothing is a mystery. I don't know how many millions, hundreds of millions of humans have used this over the past couple, 10,000 years. So you should get the hang of it if you practice. First of all, though, what exactly is a story? Because storytelling, before AI, storytelling was the buzzword. I was touring around doing workshops for everybody, lecturing in startups about storytelling because everybody wanted to know what it is. It's actually quite simple. It's a bridge between people and ideas. That sounds super abstract, but it's quite simple. People are confronted by ideas all day, every day. It's very easy to get distracted and not focus on one thing. Using storytelling, you can bring people in and get them interested in what you're trying to tell them. That's either, in my case, my fictional project of whatever, whether it's a TV series or a film or a novel or whatever, gets them interested. It can also be a vehicle to transport people into other worlds beyond our own. Also sounds very abstract, but that's one step deeper beyond the bridge, right? Once they've crossed the bridge, once you've hooked them into your story, to keep them there and actually transmit some important message, get them to feel something that you might want them to feel. Like if you're a documentary filmmaker, for example, and you have a very important real life situation that you want to get them involved in, the tools of storytelling will make them care for that. And specifically, it's that's what I just said. Basically, it's a way to make us care for beings foreign to ourselves. Now, what does that mean specifically? Well, imagine stories that have done really well at the box office. Oftentimes, they're about absurd, non-real situations, right? Like what was The Shape of Water? I don't know if you've seen that film, but it won Oscars. And many people seem to think that storytelling needs to be something relatable. Yes, but more on that later. Relatable doesn't mean real. I find oftentimes that stories that try to show a slice of real life are the most boring because they don't make us care using storytelling. Storytelling is not real life. Those are two very, very different things. Storytelling is distilled. I don't know why I don't know why balloons just went over my face, but okay. It's distilled, focused. Characters are not real people. Plots are not real life. So let's get into said plots. Plot structure is basically what your characters experience in the story, and it's actually quite simple. So I'm going to share something that I learned from the writer Kurt Vonnegut. Some of you may have heard of him. He's a very successful American writer. Unfortunately, has passed away, and he had a very funny way to go about this. And one story he likes to tell is that pretty much every story is the following: someone experiencing life on two axes, right? Good fortune, so good feeling, something good happens in their life, or something bad can happen in their life. That's the up-down axis. And from left to right, we have the beginning of our story and the end of our story. And you might have somebody that's feeling quite good about their life, and they start right about there. Then something terrible happens to them in their life. They devolve into uncontrolled circumstances that they need to then figure out a way out of and they fight their way back into the good life, and ideally end up feeling a little better about themselves and have grown as a person, and their life has now improved. For some reason, people love this story and consume it again and again and again. I mean, how many movies do you know that are exactly like this? Most novels are like this. Most novels that we enjoy are like this. And this is something very fundamental, a structure called the man in a hole structure. I think you can all see why it's called this, but of course it can be a woman, it can be any sort of animated creature, whatever. And Kurt Vonnegut discovered through reading a lot, through studying this quite a bit, that this is one of just 8 plot structures that describe any story that has been successful in the history of mankind. So this, if you screenshot anything from this presentation or pause it or whatever, this is what I want you to take with you. You don't have to reinvent stories. They're all here, and you just pick one and you go for it. So Man in Hole is the most basic one. People get in trouble and can get out of trouble. Boy meets girl. In that case, it's just the story starts a little bit more neutral usually. The character isn't feeling too good about their life. They're just kind of neutral. And then they meet this girl of their dreams and so forth. I would personally not recommend the bottom ones. Those are slightly more primitive, like New Testament, Old Testament. Things just keep getting better until they're suddenly not, and then there's a big battle at the end, and then they go good again. I find that quite difficult to tell. In the case of Harry Potter, I think it's done very well because the world itself is so magical and so different from our own that interesting things keep happening to Harry until the very end when Voldemort finally shows up. So it is possible. It's a little more difficult, and you need to be pretty good at world building. I know people say Harry Potter world building isn't too great. I politely disagree. I think it's excellent, and we can separate that from the author. She's a very good writer, in my opinion. So what do you actually do with these structures? Like, how do you actually approach writing a story like this? Well, it's quite simple, and I'm going to introduce a different way of doing so that is more applicable to somebody like a TV writer or a film writer who needs to tell stories again and again all the time, especially if it's like episodic. If you're Rick and Morty, for example, if you're writing a story like that, Dan Harmon has a structure for you. So this is something called Dan Harmon's story circle, and it's kind of a recipe. It's a boiled down version of the man in a hole structure, or the hero's journey, if you've heard of that. That will help you really step by step develop your story. You can very roughly split it into 2 halves, right down the middle. Order, so the world as it should be, or chaos, which is where all the interesting stuff in your story happens. And the way you can tell this is basically you have your character, and this is the you section, where they're living in comfort. Quite obvious, this is the world as it is, this is the protagonist. And to answer the question if the session will teach tools such as using Gemini Storybook, not really. I'm not going to get into that, but I will be showing how to prompt LLMs, specifically ChatGPT, but it should work in everything, on how to help you use these structures. If you, for example, maybe you're more of a visual storyteller or a world builder, you have everything except plot and character, basically, which are very important. You can prompt LLMs. They're very, very well versed in these structures that I'm showing you today. They will know what Dan Harmon's story circle is, what Kurt Vonnegut's shapes are, and can help you build a story if you are more into like the mid-journey prompting rather than the dialogue writing part of it. Absolutely no problem. So after this you step, something happens. There is a need. Your protagonist needs something. This is usually a moment in the story where something goes wrong, quite basic, right? Like, I don't know, it could be anything from there's a leaky faucet in their apartment to aliens attack the city they live in. That's literally, that's how wide the spectrum of story is. And then they choose to begin their journey. If you've heard of the hero's journey, which is kind of a basic structure, there might be a little bit of back and forth going on here. They might not be so excited to go on this adventure. A reluctant hero is a hero nonetheless, and they could be a little bit forced to go on this journey. What I've learned is that, especially in a comedy movie, but this can apply to most everything, protagonists usually take the absolute least amount of effort to get to the next step. Like, it will not be believable if your character has, like, if aliens attack New York and they're living in New York and they're kind of this average normal character, they will not go get a gun and go and try and fight the aliens. They might try to escape first, right? Or call their mom and see if she's okay, and only be slowly forced to get more and more extreme in their reactions because they can't escape. Their car broke down or got destroyed by the aliens, or their mom isn't answering her phone. So they might have to go and leave their apartment to go to their mom, right? Like, your stories are believable, your characters are believable if they only ever try to do the next least possible thing. And that can get you to very extreme situations, which might seem unrealistic if you do them from the start. So that's what I can recommend to you. If you want to tell that big Star Wars adventure, Luke is a moisture farmer. Luke doesn't want to go have lightsaber battles. You need to work your way up there. So that's where they end up in chaos. And this section, search, they face trials. That's the meat of the fun of your story. This can be called fun and games, right? This is what your trailer promises. And this is why trailers work so well, sometimes better than the actual story, is because all the trailer moments are in this trial section. This is the lightsaber battles, the space flight, like all the cool stuff. Then they get what they want, find, quite obvious, but they pay a heavy price. So it's never easy for your character. Of course, the interesting stuff is always, might be where another important character dies, right? Like, something terrible happens, whether that's Gandalf or Obi-Wan or whatever. This is that moment. And then they make their way home and have changed. So ideally in your story, at the end of your story, your character should have grown, should have developed in some way. More on that later, how you can do that. And funnily enough, this story circle can be repeated for a series, and your character will always have learned something by the end. Even if it's a sitcom, it's fine if they might have to learn that again the next episode. People tend to forget. Like, if you notice, every sitcom, characters, they never develop because that's your story engine. That needs to keep happening. Good.
Funny, yeah. That you mentioned Dan Harmon's story cycle. Rick and Morty is notorious by their plots and twists, and there is
Yep.
even an episode of script writing, and
Yeah.
it's introduced on a very, very creative way.
With the
It's
train, right?
with the train, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's brilliant. If you're not fans of Rick and Morty, it's fine. Just if you're interested in storytelling, go see that episode. I will try to find it and put it in the comments.
Yeah, it's excellent. I mean, Rick and Morty is such that they have such solid story, like screenwriting. That's why it works for so many seasons. Even, I mean, I found the characters in the first episodes really disgusting. I mean, if I'm honest, like, I couldn't stand it. But the writing was so good that I mean, I've seen all the seasons multiple times now. So how does AI really play into this? It can help you find plot structures. Like, if you just have an idea, that's usually not enough to write a story, right? But if you give your fundamental idea and ask ChatGPT, for example, to put it in Dan Harmon's story circle, it knows that structure and can give you quite solid directions. So in this absurd example, I said, okay, what if a coffee shop owner discovers that his milk frother is trying to communicate with him through, like, Morse code or something? Just absurd premise. And what ChatGPT will usually do is give you kind of a default version of it. I'm not saying this is great, but what it did is, okay, so the coffee shop owner is an ex-hacker who's hiding. And then that's why he recognizes that his milk frother is speaking binary to him via vibrations. So then he decodes the message and discovers that it's an AI that's been trapped in appliances after the corporation behind the AI was shut down, and is warning him about an impending cyber attack. And it's going through the steps, and they work quite well. And in the end, he realizes, okay, this passion, right, won't leave him alone as a hacker. So he's going to keep facing these situations and needs to go through them. So it's kind of fun. But what about these characters, right? I think characters personally for me are the most difficult part of this. I mean, I love world building specifically. I can build entire like encyclopedias of how the politics of my fantasy worlds work, um, and get stuck there because I know most people are into stories for the characters. I'm also personally a Michael Crichton fan. Like I love reading Michael Crichton books, and he's encouraging to me because his characters are completely bland. Like there's they're always vehicles for like these sci-fi stories and technologies that he wants to convey, but nonetheless they are essential. Why? So I'm going to invite you to um, go on this little trip with me, and I'm going to ask you to Michael Crichton, the Jurassic Park writer, and also Westworld. So he's kind of a sci-fi. He always wrote very contemporary stories. So he would take a currently available technology like cloning, right, and then come up with absurd but really really cool adventures. Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to hire one of the following guys I'm about to introduce to you. So imagine that you want to have an expedition organized, and you're looking for two guys, and your first guy is someone who has accomplished all four of the so-called polar goals already. So he's organized expeditions to the North Pole, the South Pole, and the Northeast and Northwest Passage. And for three of those, he was actually the first person to accomplish that expedition. Now, the second guy who's applying for your expedition has led three expeditions to the Antarctic, and every single one of them has ended in complete death and disaster, and not once did he actually make it to his goals. So, which of these guys do you think is considered more successful, like is more famous, and somebody you might hire for your expedition? Right? Do you want the left guy who's made all the expeditions and like had all these successes, or do you think the right guy's name is somebody we associate more with adventure and is an interesting character?
Probably the
So
right one.
exactly. So the left guy is someone named Roald Amundsen. And if you're into like adventure, you may have heard of him, but the right guy is somebody named Ernest Shackleton. And Ernest Shackleton, there are 26 books about him, endless podcast episodes, huge big budget TV series, and he's considered just an incredible leader through adversity. There are like business leadership books analyzing Ernest Shackleton. Remember, complete failure. Roald Amundsen was perfectly prepared every time, and unfortunately, because of that, considered a pretty boring guy. I mean, his most famous quote is, "Adventure is bad planning." So the difference between these two characters is Shackleton. If you want a character in your story, you need a Shackleton. Amundsen is not going to make for a good movie because he's going to study maps, plan out, hire the best possible team, and just go to his goal and come back home. You don't want to read about that. So humans are usually drawn to characters who have more things happen to them, who have failures in their life, who may have bad characters, bad personalities, bad leadership skills, and get into conflicts all the time. So how do you actually do that? How do you build an interesting character like that? So the fantasy writer Brandon Sanderson has a three-step process, and he calls it CPR, because the first one, the C, is capability. So your characters, so there's a they missing, they have skills that make them fun to watch. This is what you might, James Bond is obviously a good agent. He shoots well. He knows how to use all these gadgets. He's very charismatic. He's good at talking to people. But that's boring by itself. They also need to be actually proactive. They can't just constantly react to the story and have things happen to them. They need to make decisions themselves, be able to plan the next step ahead, and move the plot forward. There are some stories that are exceptions to this, but you will always find them, knowing where to go and knowing what to do next. So they need to be proactive, and they still need to be relatable. So that's one weakness I recognize in a lot of, especially like fan fictions and stuff. if you're like writing about a character you'd love to be yourself, of course you're giving them insane sword fighting skills and they look amazing and they're charismatic and so romantic and blah. You will probably lose your audience in this relatability factor because they need to recognize flaws that they might be going through themselves, right? There needs to be weaknesses. Indiana Jones, for example, I love the character of Indiana Jones because he's not the perfect fighter. He will get punched in the face and fall off trucks. And in a weird way, that's relatable, right? Like that's I would be falling off trucks if I tried to get into fistfights with Nazis, right? Like that's I need to see these weaknesses.
So this classic TV show where you have multiple characters and each have their own traits. So they can, people from everywhere, from every aspect can relate to those, can relate to at least one of those characters, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what helps a good ensemble, right? You might not like every single character, but there needs to be one that you can recognize in yourself. And
And also,
interestingly, yeah.
with reality shows, it's the same. They structure the whole thing by the relatability,
Yes.
and not just because they're interesting, the characters are interesting to them. No, they have to be relatable to the target audience.
Which honestly, that's why I think I don't know if anybody watched the first season of Golden Bachelor, but like that was way more interesting to me than previous seasons because not because I'm old, but they are people that I recognize from my life, right? Like grandparents or parents, or just they seemed much more real and relatable than hot models or whatever they had before. There's one more aspect to this technique because you can't all have like these things are not weighted equally. You have some more choice, and Brandon Sanderson suggests that in one of these three things they are extremely great. Like James Bond, he's extremely capable. Um, in one of them, they're moderate to low, so they're struggling. So I can't stick to the James Bond example, but like if you have a character, for example, they might be struggling with proactivity, right? That is where you can bring in that weakness. Their weakness might literally be in a comedy, for example, a character is quite boring, passive guy, and he's thrust into adventure and needs to learn to be proactive. That's also perfectly acceptable. That's their weakness. Or they might be dragged through the adventure the whole time. And in the final one, you can choose which one this is. They are growing and learning. Luke Skywalker is not a capable lightsaber fighter. That's what he's working on, becoming a great Jedi. And at the end, we have that moment where he's finally capable and destroys the Death Star, right? So you can pick whatever. This is a suggestion for how you can spread those techniques. Now, in between characters is equally important. You can't just have a character in a vacuum. They will always be interacting with others. And one of my mentors, thankfully, I'm so grateful that I was able to learn from Robert McKee, who's one of the top screenwriting instructors, is that the main characters have more varied behaviors, like multiple relationships to other characters where they behave differently to different people. Because you probably don't have much of an interesting character if you are the same person to everybody around you. I mean, none of you are, right? That's not a realistic person. You talk differently to your mom than to your coworkers. So if, for example, we have our main character, Liz, she might have a relationship to her daughter where she's proud of her daughter, right? It's kind of a passive activity, but let's say that's her behavior toward her daughter. But toward her husband, she's disgusted by him, right? Suddenly, oh, that's interesting. She behaves in two different ways to two different members of her family. We already have a little bit of a dynamic, at least in one direction. And to her boss, we give her another different behavior, namely she's aggressive toward her boss, which is also just kind of quirky, right? I want to see how she, like, why does she still have her job, right? That's interesting behavior. And now we can make it even more interesting to the viewer by introducing counterintuitive behaviors coming back from those characters. So what if her daughter is weirdly afraid of her mom, even though the mom is in truth very proud of her? Maybe that's a fear of not becoming as great as her mom or something. Or the husband, or the daughter could be demanding to her father, which again is kind of making the daughter a more dynamic character through varied behaviors. But because the daughter is not as important as Liz, the main character, she has two relationships versus the three that the mom has. So it's kind of mathematic. You just kind of draw your characters. Central character has three relationships. Side characters have two. Complete side characters, like the boss, for example, has only one because he's just kind of funny, right? Now, this might not be a perfect character constellation, of course. Some of these behaviors might be a little passive. They might not be as interesting as they could be. So we can also ask GPT, why not? We can input that character constellation and it will actually understand what I'm going for. And if you ask it to use Robert McKee's methods, that name will mean something to the LLM. And I actually got quite an interesting response here. And it told me to build more contradictions inside each relationship. So, for example, to deepen that Liz and daughter relationship, the mom can be proud, but also resentful that the daughter is quite independent and doesn't really need the mom's approval, which is kind of unusual. And it's just suggesting I make that daughter rebel a little more. Or the husband, for example, the suggestion is instead of just being disgusted by her husband, she sticks with him because he still has something that she desperately needs, right? So she has to play nice and can't just be, too aggressive toward him. So there is quite interesting. This continued on for a bit. I'm only showing you a little snippet of what ChatGPT can do, but this is honestly most of what I use LLMs for. I do my writing by myself, but it's a great sounding board to help deepen some relationships, deepen characters that might seem a little superficial at first. So this was actually quite surprising to me that it was able to give me feedback in this depth. So that's definitely something I can suggest you do. And what I would recommend for you to take away from this, obviously I'm condensing a lot of information into this hour, but the keywords of like people's techniques that I'm recommending, Robert McKee, Dan Harmon, Brandon Sanderson, all of these are people that most LLMs, at least I tested this in Claude and ChatGPT, that they will know and might give you a more clear direction in your prompt rather than just saying, improve my story or something, which can be quite vague. At this point, are there any concrete questions or tips you might be looking for that you've been missing?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you do have any questions and if you would love any tips, just put them down in the comment side and we'll address them at the same second. Don't be shy.
So I am actually also curious. I'm going to ask you a question, just because this is probably a good point. I'm assuming a lot of you are filmmakers, AI filmmakers, who are going to be bringing this into a visual medium. But correct me if I'm wrong. I'd be curious about what actually brought you here. Like, what about the storytelling specifically you found interesting? So I can, go maybe a bit deeper into some points that that you're here for.
Here we
Yeah.
go. We have a question here from Jeff. Question
Yes.
about using authors' names in your prompts. I know regarding image generation, it's kind of a taboo practice. How
Yeah.
do authors feel about having their names referenced in prompts?
Yeah. It's an excellent question, and I have thought about this a lot. Actually, this is probably a good moment to bring it up. I personally adhere to in my visual work specifically, like when I'm doing images or videos, something we developed called the FAIR Codex. I'm going to put the link in here. That's something we're promoting. It's basically an open source set of rules that you can adhere to try to make AI as ethically used as possible, and that does include prompting names. So what I would not do, and what I personally never do, because I write my final text myself as well, but is use styles from authors. Like I would never say, hey, use Michael Crichton's writing style in this scene, or help me structure this like Michael Crichton. What I personally do find ethical is using educators' content. So all of the names that I would put in there, like Robert McKee or Brandon Sanderson, because he has a set of university lectures where he teaches his method specifically. I personally, for my personal ethical codex, is okay because that's writing educational material that they put out there themselves. It's not taking their product, right? It's taking their information that they teach and condensing it. Um, Feel free to disagree with me in that, but I personally would be totally fine. Like if, I mean, I have lectures out there on YouTube. If you said, hey, how would Albert Bozesan do this? I hope the information is correct. I doubt it because I don't think I have enough data out there for that specifically.
Scott has another question. Oh, I'm sorry, are you finished? Didn't want to interrupt you too much.
One more sentence actually about Brandon Sanderson because it's interesting. I thought he would be anti-AI because he's such a, he's a fantasy writer. He puts so much fictional work out there, but he recently actually said he uses ChatGPT and LLMs for research specifically. So when he's like not finding the right word in his writing, he will say, hey, what's like a synonym? It starts with an F, I'm not sure. So it was kind of cool and refreshing to hear that long established writers themselves are excited about AI. Kurt Vonnegut himself, he predicted that LLMs would be able to tell stories in like the 80s, which was kind of crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Scott is asking, do you actually create character constellations? Also, could you share an example of how to use this for creating corporate narrative or storylines?
Yeah,
Good question,
I
Scott.
do. Yeah, I do. I usually do them on paper, right? This was just for a better looking slide. But my character constellations are often actually how I develop my characters. Like I said in the beginning, I don't love characters from the get-go, right? I usually have a world idea or like a premise idea, like what if somebody discovers that there's a bomb aboard the next NASA capsule and they need to stop the launch from happening or whatever. That's never like, hey, this character has trouble with her daughter. So I often just honestly go through like random emotions, sometimes random behaviors people might have toward each other and say, hey, would this be interesting in this story? And that's how I develop my constellations. Corporate narrative and storylines, it's changed over the past couple of years because the audience catches up on how advertising works a lot. But the reason, like we had all those explainer videos a couple of years ago when people said, "This is Tom. Tom struggles in his HR needs every day at work until Tom discovered HRLLM.com, and now it's a breeze because they introduced a character that they were hoping the audience might relate to more than if that company just kind of did like a video walkthrough of their HR tool, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? I can't in good conscience recommend doing that anymore because everybody did the explainer videos like that at some point. But I think the absolute best at telling stories in advertising is a company called Sandwich Video. I'm going to put that link in there, and they've mastered like quirky, good advertising. It's not a. So definitely study their work and what they do, how they set out their videos. They usually have very weird characters because I think in advertising specifically, you can exaggerate a lot more than if you had to like carry a whole 90-minute movie with a specific character. They can just be absurd, doing silly things. And what you need to remember for advertising is something called the gap. So instead of building like a whole narrative structure, you set up an expectation and subvert it with something else happening. That's called the gap, right? It's just a contrast between what the audience is expecting and what actually happens. Like a good joke, right? There was a Six Flags theme park ad a couple years ago, quite a few years ago, probably over 20 years ago, where this really frail old man comes out of a bus in a suburban neighborhood and just like looks around and people are all staring at him like, what is this old guy doing here? And then he suddenly starts dancing and like throws away his walker and takes them all to the theme park and is like this super fit, like a young guy having fun at the theme park. That's enough. That's already storytelling. You subverted an expectation and hooked people by this strange behavior, and they'll watch the ad to the end, and that's all you want, right? Is there any more?
Oh, Xander asks, vocational audiovisual teacher, camera and editing. I know my
Yep.
students will be needing to work with AI. Did some testing and Prudson, what is Prudson? I'm interested to learn more. What's a Prudson? Do you know what's Prudson? Oh, Dutch word. Okay. No
Oh, he
idea.
just needed to do my students. Okay, so you know your students will be needing to work. Okay, good. Yes, there will be a recording. There is a recording of this. In that case, I mean, I'm just going to continue. I think there were just a couple like profiles of people and why they're here. So I think I'll be able to bring that into the conversation for sure. So what I would like to also introduce to some, especially AI filmmakers, like if you're not used to working in film already or have only started recently telling your narratives, I would like to introduce you to, you know, actual just screenwriting, right? Just give you a quick rundown of why a screenplay is set up the way it is and how you can write your screenplays so that AIs will understand it. So just very, very basic for those who may have never like written one yourself. The top line is always the location. It starts with like exterior or interior, EXT, INT, then the location, and then like the time of day. Then this bottom part is an action line. It's a description of what your characters are doing, how the scene looks, and then you will have your name of your character centered on the page in parentheticals, in parentheses, maybe their emotions, and or how they're saying their dialogue, and then the actual dialogue. And there you go. That's how you write a screenplay. It's quite simple. But oh yeah, you're right. It's sandwich.co. Sorry about that. The sandwich video. The trick that I found, because you can't put this format into ChatGPT because of just the centering, right? You can't copy paste because then the whole alignment will be off. If you're using professional screenwriting software, it will not like this type of writing. But a couple years ago, an annoyed screenwriter figured out a way how to write screenplays without needing to get the expensive like screenwriting software, right? Because Final Draft is like $250 and is old, it's buggy. You don't really want to work in that. So what you can do instead is use the fountain markup language. It looks almost the same, right? But it's all aligned to the left, and you can write this on your phone into the Notes app, into like Notepad on Windows, into TextEdit on Mac, into Word, into Pages. Like you can just put this anywhere. And ChatGPT knows how to write scripts with Fountain. So by using this, you can actually convert it at a later step into a PDF or into a final draft document. And nobody will know, right? Like all the Hollywood studios, they're expecting final draft documents. You can convert it at the very end and send it to them, and they won't notice. What does that actually mean for us? Well, we can play with this by also not writing our full screenplay, but using placeholders. ChatGPT, for example, will understand this format, and you can prompt something like, hey, I have the following screenplay scene from an adventure movie. The dialogue is placeholder, and I want this to become a full scene of 2 pages. And I would like you to write it out according to the character descriptions that I'm also providing. Please output your writing in the Fountain markup language. Keep all the text left aligned, just like my input. And then I describe my characters. So this Anna character, she's totally scared, but she doesn't want her friend to know. So she's hiding it behind a sense of superiority. The friend is disgusted by this fear. Like she hates that Anna is so fearful of everything at her age and would actually like to get rid of her. But she tries to stay polite because Anna, her friend, is actually her boss's daughter. So the actual scene I'm putting in looks like this. Instead of writing the actual dialogue, I say Anna tries to convince Gabrielle to head a different direction away from this spooky noise that she's hearing in the temple. But Gabrielle insists on venturing deeper and finding the source of the sound in the hope that it might be a way out of this Babylonian temple. So with only this input, ChatGPT gave me this. It actually got a little creative with the action. It described the temple a little bit more, but okay, fine. And you can see it even gave Anna some emotions, like now she's tense. That came from ahead, which means we don't go ahead. Not necessarily. No, no, that's exactly what it means. When you hear something breaking twigs in the dark, you don't go toward it, Gabrielle. You're supposed to be the sensible one. So there's that aggression that I wanted, right? She's trying to be superior. Like, no, no, I'm not scared. This is just what we're supposed to be doing, right? It's the rules, you idiot. So this scene actually ended up quite fun. Gabrielle is a little snarky here. You know, everything here could kill us. Anna, the sand, the walls, you tripping over your own shadow. Pick your poison. Come on, let's keep going, right? And this continues for pages and pages. I think more than the 2 pages I requested. I don't think ChatGPT knows how length works, but it's a quite easy process. If you're stuck writing, if you don't like writing dialogue, you can get your whole script written out by an LLM if you know the emotional journey your characters are on, how they're supposed to be behaving, and where the scene is supposed to be going, right? Because it gets pretty bad if it's needing to come up with the structure itself. But if you give those important emotional behaviors and moments, it's quite good at following them. It's like a great intern. So, writing screenplays with AI assistants, I suggest you can just write your structure, your basics in any writing software using this fountain method. More on that is online. I, of course, made it very simple, but just look up fountain markup and then ask AI for the support in that same format and then convert it at the very end. There's like free websites like screenplane.com that you can go to and you just upload your text file and it'll give you a fully professionally formatted screenplay that's ready to be sent out. And you don't need to spend a ton of money on old software. So it's
I
pretty
have a
cool.
question, if I may.
Yeah.
Would it help if I would, just download a bunch of scripts and create my own GPT and just ask him, do my writing according to those scripts?
I mean, I personally, as someone who adheres to the FAIR Codex, I would be a little critical of that for a couple of reasons. But honestly, I think especially some of the more creative writing optimized models like ChatGPT 4.0 or Claude are perfectly capable. Like they've seen enough screenplays that they can do that by themselves. And even though screenplays are much shorter than like novels, I think they're still way too long to like understand the full context of like what makes a good screenplay. So you can probably do it iteratively. You could make like an agent, I think, or an agentic system that like you have one that knows like Dan Harmon's story circle, okay, and that plans out the story, and you have one that plans out the character constellation, and those two go together, and then like step by step, I think you could do some pretty amazing stuff. Now I want to try that. That's, damn
Yeah,
it.
we're actually teaching exactly that in Lighthouse Academy with commercial LLMs. We create agents and then let agents to talk to each other, I mean, we
Yep.
help them to communicate, but yeah. So we build an agent for characters, we build an agent for script, we build an agent for, and then we let them all into one house and they create stuff. And it's a pretty good stuff they create.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I'm very much not one of those people that thinks like, oh, storytelling is something that only people can do. Like, um, we're fast approaching absolutely serviceable storytelling from AIs, I'm sure. Like it's only going to get better. Brandon Sanderson agrees. I like having him as my backing because for me, he's like such a classic writer. Like he spends all day, every day sitting at his computer writing every word by himself. And even he says like, it's coming. There's no um probably no like soul that makes humans always better at telling stories than a machine could possibly ever be, right? There's going to be exceptions. I think the best work is always going to be done by humans for the foreseeable future, but that might not even have that much to do with the story quality or the writing quality, but rather that people fundamentally will rather consume something that was made by a human. Like we need the marketing. Like we want to go to the bookstore and have our books signed by a real person for now. So that's, I think, the more human aspect than the actual product itself. Here's a comment on the ChatGPT. Yeah, if we input font and size, then ChatGPT calculates the number of words to fit into the page. That's interesting. Yes, I would have expected it because it's a screenplay. It should know that screenplays are always the same font and size. Because that's kind of another cool, I forgot to say this earlier, but the point of writing screenplays like one does is also technical. One page almost always equals exactly 1 minute of screen time, just because the font is a Courier font and like the margins are very strictly set. The line distance is all set. So every script is written the same way, which can be very helpful for production. You know, later on, you can say, okay, this is 90 pages. It's going to be a 90-page movie,
I used to think
more or
that
less.
that space between the lines is for corrections, for annotations, and so on. I didn't know for a very, very long time that one page is 1 minute. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think the best function of screenplays, like the most helpful reason. Because otherwise, I was thinking like, why do I need to buy extra software? Can't you just take my Word document? No, this has a good reason for existing. There's one specific software recommendation that I would like to make, totally unpaid, but I want to send some people his way. I don't know if you've heard of Storywork. This is a small startup. I don't want to get the country wrong. Eastern Europe, small startup from Eastern Europe. I think it's Hungary actually, by an HBO writer who did quite a few successful shows, and he built a specific screenwriting app uh, that helps screenwriters use LLMs to structure the story, build the characters. Pretty much, it's not agentic; it's step by step. But one of the coolest features of this is that you can go into this chat mode where it will ask you a series of questions about your story intelligently. Like you can say, okay, hey, what's your premise? Give me as much information as you have. Who are your characters? What's the plot you have in mind? And if you enter specific things, it will ask you like smart questions about what you might be thinking and give you suggestions. You can also just say like, my only idea is it's on an airplane, right? And it will say, okay, how about this and this and this, and it'll give you suggestions. And at the end, it can help you flesh out it can take you all the way to the entire end of the screenplay, right? If you want to, treatment or screenwriting. And the base level free account that you get is already a fully fleshed out screenwriting tool. And that's what I love about the business itself. Like they said, Final Draft should be free software. Like that's so basic. That's what we're going to offer without the AI features. Like if you don't want to use any of the LLM stuff, just you can write a script here because we think that's free, right? That's so simple. It needs to be free. And shout out to them. They're very, very cool. Now, a couple pointers for some mistakes that might happen if you're telling a story. Changing your story too early is something I see very often. If you're going out and getting feedback from people, ask at least 5 very different people that are not friends and not family. Because I've seen a lot of people, I've changed stories because I like went to my girlfriend and she didn't like it, like she didn't get it, and I tossed it. And then later, like something like in one case, 2 years later, I like said, hey, to a friend of mine, like, hey, no, it wasn't a friend. It was a coworker specifically. Like I was just having lunch with him and said, hey, here's this idea I had because you were talking about you liking this movie. What do you think of it? He loved it. I just had pitched it originally to the wrong audience. So make sure before adjusting anything, talking to multiple people. Very valuable interpreting feedback tip that I've gotten is anybody, especially non-writers, will always recognize problems in your story. They will find problems that you need to listen to, but they will almost never have a solution for you. They will tell you how they think you should fix it, and they will almost always be completely wrong. So keep your ears open for the problems, plug them for the solution because they will always, give you some thing that they saw in a movie last night and say, "Oh, it's awesome. You should add the plane exploding in this scene." No, don't do that.
And
Or
if you live on, excuse me, if you live in Balkans, do not give your script to your mother because she will adore it and she won't have comment on anything. She will just say, "You are the best scriptwriter ever."
that sort of mom is amazing to getting you to like age 18, because that gave me like the cockiness to think, oh, I belong on a set. I need to work in film, right? That will get you there, and then you will get bonked on the head for like a decade. But thanks, mom, for that. That was awesome until that age. Keep up sharing my LinkedIn post, though. I saw you shared this event, so thanks. Um, yeah, and that, I mean, technically we're through my outline, so I'm happy to answer any further questions. Specifically, I have a couple more shout outs I can give if you're looking for specific tools to work on your stories. But
And while we're waiting for your questions, we have another event next week, and our guest will be Jeffrey Hippolito, and he will be presenting his Cinemachine, which is a great AI-based software for character building, for visualization, to to finish your script writing and so on. And he will be presenting his software next week. So that's August 21st at 1 p.m., I think. Yeah. It's everything is on LinkedIn. I will put the link here in the comments. And yeah, I've seen it and I was very, very impressed. I'm very hard to impress because I'm always discovering new tools and, just selecting the good ones. And this one hits the nail because it solves quite a lot of very good problems. But yeah, it was kind of it. This is it. Thank you, Albert, so much for your participation. And
feel free to
thank
commit,
you.
by the way. I'm open for questions outside of talks as well.
Yeah, get in touch, asking questions. I already did it, and he was very kind. He's not angry or anything. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. I hope I will see you next week. All right. Bye bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you. Bye.
guys. Bye.